Welcome to the second episode of the Relationship Manifesto, a series of, it's going to be about 14 podcasts. And the podcasts parallel the chapters, each episode of the podcast parallel the chapters in the book, The Relationship Manifesto, by the author, Dr. Stephen Whitehead. Stephen's an academic, he's an author, he's a relationship coach, and he's a researcher. Welcome again, Stephen.
Thank you, Chris. Nice to be here.
We'll stay with the Stephen rather than the doctor, I hope.
Okay, no problem.
I know. In fact, if you tell me to start calling you doctor, I know I've done something wrong.
Yeah.
So the 12 points. Well, we are archiving and keeping a record of the podcast series on a blog, and please feel free to go to the blog and leave comments on any of the episodes that you're listening to or you've listened to. The URL, the address of the blog is http:// all of that stuff, and the www, the www, and relationshipmanifesto.posterous, posterous, posterous, or some people say posterous.com. And there you'll see the 12 points which we're working through in each of the episodes. And the first one then, of course our last podcast, which is the first one, was the introduction, was the warm-up. But this one is the first chapter, which is called Why Relationships Fail. And I'm going to start off by, and I like to do this when I'm interviewing or talking with people, asking for the elevator pitch. And for those culturally not sure what an elevator pitch is you're getting into an elevator, which in the UK we call a lift, so you have 60 seconds to talk to somebody in the elevator to tell them about the topic. So Stephen, what is your elevator pitch on why relationships fail?
Basically, relationships fail because they go on too long. The couple in the relationship have run out of love, they've run out of emotional energy, and they've often come to a crossroads in their life, and they've gone off in different directions without realising it. The purpose of this chapter is not to lay blame on people for these relationship changes. In actual fact, to see them not as failures, but as changes in life patterns. That's the aim of this chapter. It's to illustrate not only why relationships fail, but also to offer a solution to this, to avoid this notion of failure, and that is to introduce into a relationship from the very outset the concept of a relationship breakpoint of about 10 years.
Okay, we got to about the 32nd floor then, so you just managed to get it in the elevator. I have to tell you, when I looked at the 12 points in the manifesto, this first one, why relationships fail, that's a pretty negative thing to start off a book with. It is, isn't it? Yeah, welcome to my book. Right, let me first of all tell you why the relationships fail. Why?
Well, I think it's important to recognise the people who are going to be reading a book like this. Anybody in a relationship is concerned that the relationship doesn't fail. But too often they do. In fact, I would go as far to say that globally marriage is now a failed institution. Marriage itself as a social structure creates more emotional pain, disharmony, financial unsettlement, regret, disappointment than any other. And in that respect, the marriage itself is flawed, and we probably have to move on from it. And people are doing. It's not just me saying it, but all the evidence is that marriages are declining in popularity, and those people who are getting married are increasingly likely to get divorced sometime later. So the idea of failure is built into relationships. What I want to do is actually move away from the concept of failure and move into the concept of change, adjustment, people having life journeys which are going to go on for quite some time, and accommodating the changes in their life as a consequence of that.
Right, but this is I need to check, this is the Relationship Manifesto. This isn't the Marriage Manifesto, is it?
No.
Because you're talking about, you sounded just then, you were talking about marriages failing rather than relationships failing. I'm not quite sure what the difference is between the two.
I think relationships, we're talking about intimate sexual relationships, that's the context in which the book's positioned. A part of that genre, part of that domain, of course, is marriages, but there are other forms of relationship as well, which don't lead to marriage. The the incidence of marriage is declining, but the incidence of people going in and out of relationships is increasing. So what we've got here is multiplicity. We've got a lot of emotional energy going into seeking partners, trying to hold on to relationships, trying to make them work, often finding that they work for a while, but they're not working for a lifetime. And that's the case whether it's a live-in relationship, whether it's a temporary passing relationship, or whether it's a relationship's been committed to marriage. So always within this, within the relationships, there's this fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of being on one's own, fear of letting go, fear of moving on. The truth of the matter is that in today's world, we are moving on, and both men and women are moving on for a number of reasons. These reasons maybe are complex individually within a relationship, but the dynamics of relationships are that we should not go into any sort of relationship of whatever level expecting it to last a lifetime. Chances are it's not going to.
I'm really depressed now.
Mm-hmm.
It just sounds really bleak, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
well, that is the misconception. That is a misconception. I mean, I know you, Chris, you've had many relationships. I've had many relationships. I think you would be hard pushed to think of someone in our age group who's only had one relationship all their life. I know now. You think it'd be very difficult to do so. It's
our generation.
Of our generation, and even that's our generation. If you go back, if you go forward to those in their 40s, 50s, 30s, 20s, highly unlikely. So we're in the reality of the world. The reality of the world of relationships is change, moving in, finding love, moving on from love. I want to change the context of that. It's not bleak, it's reality. I'm not making it bleak. I'm just saying what's out there, what's happening. I'm not creating the world that we're in. I am honestly appraising it and saying to people, this is what's happening. So I don't want us to continue with a situation where we're constantly carrying baggage or guilt or regret because there's change in our lives. Change is part of living. Change is life. It's fundamental to life. Without change, there is no movement. There is no possibility of progress. We need change. It's important. We don't want to be ridden with pain, though, every time there is change. So the concept of a relationship moving on and evolving into something new or finishing is absolutely central to the book's aim, and that's why I bring in the idea of the 10-year relationship breakpoint.
Yes. Why are we having this debate now? Why are we having this discussion now? Why was it, or were people having it in the I was going to say the last century? Last century was only 11 years ago. Mm-hmm. So why are we having this now? Or did our parents have this? Or did the Victorian family have this? Is this a new paradigm? Is this a new issue?
Yeah, it's a new.
And why is it a new issue?
It's a new issue because fundamentally women have changed. Why have women changed? They've changed because the world in which they're growing up and living and forming relationships and careers has changed. Why did people get married in the past? Largely at the instigance of the woman. She sought out a partner, she pursued that partner because it gave her social status, it removed the possibility of stigma as a spinster, it gave her the increased possibility of financial security, it gave her the opportunity for regular sex, and it gave her the opportunity to have children, all in a social framework which was accepted and by society and reinforced by society. Now, a woman of any age can have pretty much all those things without being in a permanent relationship, without even living with someone. We have increasing numbers of what we call LATs. These are couples who are living...
Sorry, what was that?
LATs, L-A-T-S.
Right.
These are living apart togethers. So they might
Oh, it's a new term. I've not heard that acronym before.
It's these are couples who will have their own house. They're independent in so much as how they live their lives. They have their own friendship groups, social networks, careers, but they're in a relationship. We're seeing a lot of this in the West, and it's moving out here in the East. We're living more independent lives, solo existences, but we don't want to be on our own. We don't want to be lonely. We want to be with someone, but there's a limit to how much we want to give to someone in that process. In the past, women went into relationships, they went into marriage with maybe the intention or expectation of sacrifice, personal sacrifice, having a life that they would devote to their husband. Women today are not doing that. What happens when women get educated is they often choose career over marriage, and if they're going to get married, it's going to be later in their life, in the 30s rather than the 20s. Often women with degrees, with a good education and career, can choose to have children outside of marriage, and that's very common now in the UK. More children are born out of wedlock than they are in wedlock in the UK now.
I'll be making some notes here. I've written down, coming back to the title of the chapter and of this episode, why relationships fail. I've written something down here which is basically get educated, get a career, make some money, and lose your relationship. That sounds a bit harsh. It's not that simple, is it? No,
I mean it's not that you lose the relationship. It's that the problem is if a woman, quite rightly, chooses that she wants to live a financially independent life, express herself sexually in her own way, discover who she is in terms of her gender and sexual identity, form her own social network, travel. These are entirely reasonable expectations. Why shouldn't she? She's only living the sort of life that many men have lived in the past. But she may well hang on to the idea of a nuclear family. All that's embedded in some nuclear family, and that is problematic. It can be problematic because it requires a renegotiation of what it means to be a wife, a husband. Those renegotiations are possible, and women welcome them. But the case is, do many men welcome them? Because it does require the man in the relationship to recognise that he's not central to the relationship, he's just one half of it. And in the past with marriages, we had patriarchal system whereby men saw themselves very much as the head of the family, reinforced by also being the male breadwinner of the family. Now women increasingly are the female breadwinner of the family. Where does that put men? Moreover, why would anybody want to get married? They will want relationships, sure, but often they want a relationship that's built around love and mutuality, and when that love finishes, so does the relationship. There's no reason to hang on in there. Women can live independent lives if the love goes out of the relationship, and increasingly they do so. I'm getting the impression
that women are controlling all of this. You've not said you've said several times in the last few minutes women, and said something about that. And I'm sitting here thinking, what about the guys? They used to have a saying this, right? It's what about the words, partnership? Are partnerships ever been equal? I think I know your answer to that. And in the future, are they going to be equal or not? Or
well, you and I well know that in the era that we were brought up in, no, partnerships weren't equal. If you've got a situation where a woman can only survive if she's in a marriage, where she's going to have some financial stability only if she's married. If she's no education, no possibility of a career, where she's got several children to look after at the same time, which was the common experience of women across most of the social groups up until the 70s, say. In that situation, then there's no equality, because women don't have a choice. They've got to stay with the relationship, come what may. Now they've got a choice, and they exercise it. So in that respect, the impetus for change is coming about through women's change expectations, but that doesn't neutralise men's capacity to be involved in this. Men have to wake up to the fact that women have changed, and that's another chapter in this book, and it's something we'll revisit later on in this podcast.
Yes. Male chauvinism is dead, is it? Is male chauvinism alive and well?
Well, it might be alive, it's not very well.
Good answer, I like that answer. So, can you bullet point? No, wait. Before we do it, before we go into that, I was going to ask you to bullet point what you think the reasons for failure are. Maybe that's how we'll finish it when we finish, as far as we can, as far as you can. You are an academic, and you are a researcher, and you're not just sitting here sort of thinking about something you thought about last night. There's a lot of, you've got years behind what you're telling me now, right?
Sure.
Are there any particular sort of case studies that you can have, or illustrative content that you could give us, share with us, which would help illustrate some of these reasons why relationships fail? Okay,
I mean, the book is informed by a number of case studies that I've come across in the course of my research over a number of years. I'll give you an instance of two here. One is these are all pseudonyms. Gemma's a 30-year-old Canadian woman. She's a lawyer in a large Toronto law firm. Gemma's family is quite traditional, but Gemma is not. She first had sex at age 16, and she's had many sexual partners since then. During her early 20s, she had a big love relationship that lasted for 5 years. That broke up because a partner wanted marriage and children. She did not. She is currently without a partner. She has no intention of having children, at least before she's well established in her career. Now, this is very typical of this age group. She's tried soft drugs, but now she doesn't even smoke. She likes to travel, party, and spend time with her friends, who include gay men and women, singletons like her, and some married couples. Thing is, Gemma likes men, but she's realistic about them. She knows that men often like to come on to her for sex, but fail to follow up with commitment. This irritates her and makes her sad, but then she also makes sure she doesn't play their game. You know, Gemma will have sex when it suits her, but she doesn't see it as a condition of love. She is looking for a full-on love relationship, but she also knows it has to be on her terms. So the question for Gemma, and the question I approached Gemma with, will she find love in her life, or is she always going to be a singleton? Yeah, sure, Gemma will find love, but to hold on to love, she needs to accept who she is. She needs to know and value herself. The truth is, like women of her age, her social group, Gemma is right to put herself first. She needs to be selfish in love, not give herself wholly to any man. Gemma can have the same sort of deep love relationship her father and mother have, but it won't come in quite the same way. And she will, for Gemma, that the journey of love will not stop when she meets her soulmate. It will just continue, and she needs to be open to all the possibilities that arise as a consequence.
So if we ask Gemma why her relationship failed, it lasted for 5 years, you said, is that right?
First one, yeah.
So her relationship failed because she was independent, is that right? More independent than a generation ago?
Far more independent, with far more possibilities for lifestyle choice than her family had.
So financially independent,
emotionally independent, sexually expressive, able to freewheeling, educated, intelligent 30-something woman.
Yeah, I'm actually confused because you've said a whole lot of really good things about her.
Yeah.
And yet we're talking about, and this is why the relationship failed. I'm torn between what seemed to me a list of really good things for her, and yet she's finding frustration because of a failed relationship. What?
Well, Gemma's caught in this situation of wanting a big love relationship, but there's only so much she's prepared to give for it. She wouldn't go down the path of her mother, which would be to sacrifice her career, her financial independence, in order to be with a man who then will look after her.
Yes.
Gemma wants equality and mutuality in a relationship. She doesn't want to give up the space and lifestyle and freedom she has, but she does want love in her life, and it's a complicated situation.
Yes.
So my advice to Gemma and women like her is to be aware of the fact that relationships don't necessarily last a lifetime, particularly when you're 30. And if she does go into a relationship and she's prepared to make a commitment and the partner's prepared to make a commitment, factor in a 10-year break point. At 10 years, you choose to opt out. You
Yes.
make a commitment for 10 years, and if it works after 10 years, you sign up for another 10, fine. But for the first 10, you know that's your target point.
Yes.
Rather than go in with the unbearable burden of thinking it's got to last a lifetime, it's too much.
Yes.
We're burdening ourselves with these unrealistic possibilities, hopes.
Yes.
They won't happen. For most people, they will not happen.
Yes.
And because they don't happen, we then get laden with guilt, regret, disappointment, and we
Yes.
internalize it. And when we carry it on to the next relationship, and so it goes on. The books, the bookshelves of bookshops, the shelves of bookshops are full of books on how to make a relationship last a lifetime, how to avoid failure. My approach is, don't even think of it as failure. Just think of it as movement.
Yes.
Think of it as change.
Yes. I think this 10-year, you mentioned it in the welcome one, this 10-year, you have this 10-year model, and I think, and listeners can keep a record of this, I think the 10-year model is going to come up in every episode, whatever I say, and whichever direction we go. Can I ask about kids?
Yeah, well, kids...
Kids, you see, sometimes people would say why relationships fail, and sometimes it used to be the kids, and now it's maybe because they're not kids, or how does children,
Children work two ways. One thing, in any relationship where there's a project which both parties invest in, that can be a real bond. Children can be a project.
But children last for longer than 10 years, right? They don't have a sell-by date.
Sure, no, that's right, and that can be an issue. But certainly in the early years, the work that's involved, the emotional and physical labour involved in bringing up children, is a project that both parties can share. If it is done in a sharing, mutual way. Those sorts of projects can bond a relationship. They're an important glue in a relationship. They don't necessarily have to force a relationship apart. However, the converse of that is that children can create divisions in a relationship for a bunch of reasons. Sexually, emotionally, just out of sheer tiredness. And also for many women, children also, the arrival of children presents them with the realization that they're faced with often with multiple roles. There's a lot of research gone on in this over the last few decades.
In what way? How?
Well, multiple roles whereby particularly in the West, where you've got increasing financial pressures on couples, they are both working.
Yes.
They're both holding down maybe full-time jobs. They're trying to hold a house together, a family together, and raise children at the same time, and the stretch for cash.
Yes.
It's a very, very difficult situation, and in not unsurprisingly, that can create real difficulties. The point about children is to remember, though, that children are adaptable. As long as the child knows that they're loved, and they have emotional security around them, that doesn't necessarily living in a nuclear family.
Yes.
As long as they know they've got love and emotional security around them and they're wanted, then the child will adapt. Yeah. And they are doing.
Yeah.
There's millions of children now being born in relationships where there isn't a hands-on mother and father 24 hours a day, and they're fine and they're growing up perfectly well.
So the modern day family, I'm hesitating now because I'm not sure what a modern day family is anymore.
There isn't one.
There isn't.
Well, how would you define it? What is it? I mean,
a mum, a dad, and 2.2 children, depending on which country you're in.
Yeah, that might have been in the 1950s, but not in 2011. And even in the over here in Southeast Asia, look at so many families here. They're both with. Often it's the woman is not bringing up the child. The father's not bringing up the child. It's the grandmother and grandfather bringing up the child. I know many instances of that here in Thailand, Southeast Asia. You see less of that, I have to say, in the West. But it just indicates that the idea of what is a family, we can't lay one model on it. There's multiple models of family life now, not one.
Yes.
People invent it for themselves, and I welcome that diversity, that difference. Why not?
Yes. I didn't say at the beginning to any new listeners to this episode who jumped in at this episode rather than the first one, is that Stephen and I, we're both living in Thailand at the moment. So we're not in the West, but much of what you say is still feels as though it's got a Western feel about it, right? A Western perspective about it, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I'm conscious of what I'm saying, what I'm indicating is arising out of change we're seeing in the West, Europe and North America particularly. But in the last 2 decades, we've seen strong signs of the same patterns emerging in Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, the middle class areas of cosmopolitan areas of China.
Yes.
And of course Thailand. There is change, massive change afoot in terms of gender identity, how we're expressing it, and it's largely coming about through globalization. Now, globalization is not simply impetus from the west to the east. There's also change from the east to the west. But a lot of the research has been done. A lot of the work's coming out and looking at relationships focuses on change that we're seeing in family life and relationships in Europe and the US especially.
Yeah, you mentioned actually a lot of families, the grandparents are bringing up the kids. I have over the past quarter of a century, I've had lots of dealings with expats overseas, and it tends to be there. It's interesting case studies that it's domestic helpers who are often bringing up the students. But maybe we don't go off on that tangent because that could be a whole discussion, I think.
No, but that's true. There is research showing that. I mean, you're seeing that with middle class professionals all over the world. There's recent research I was looking at. I was only reading it today on Canada. Where you've got foreign domestic workers being brought in, migrants, females, in Canada and the same in Europe and North America. And they're not just doing the housework, they're also doing the emotional labour that would have been picked up by the wife or mother, but is now being picked up by a foreign domestic worker, while leaving the wife, the woman, to pursue a career.
Yes.
So what sort of family is that?
Okay. Is that good or bad?
I'm hesitant to be judgmental about it. It just is. I'm a sociologist. I'm not a politician. I don't want to lay judgments on these changes. What I want to do is alert people to them. I mean, many people don't need alerting to them because they're in it. But at the same time, I want to also show ways of managing these changes in a way which is conducive to feeling good about oneself. I'm looking to empower people. I'm looking to bring out positive change. So even the title, Why Relationships Fail, I'm actually not. I'm not seeking to blame people for failure. In fact, I don't even. I'm not even calling it failure. It is actually just movement and change.
Yes.
In most relationships, most marriages. Let's get back to the marriages. Most marriages do not work. And I can say that with confidence because we're up to over 50% of marriages ending up in divorce or separation or some sort of breakup across the West. Why do most marriages stick around? Because it's too expensive to get divorced.
Really?
That's why.
Really?
Yeah. And you may well see, and there's, I wouldn't be surprised, I would expect to see, with the economic downturn we've now got in the West, I'd expect to see possibly fewer divorces. That's not because people are happy in the marriage, it's just that they can't afford to get divorced.
It's a bit sad, that.
It is sad, yeah.
Very sad. We said we'd try and make these about 30 minutes each one, and we're coming up to the 30-minute mark. Actually, it's only 18 minutes if you took my ramblings away, but we're coming up to the 30-minute mark, and I want to encourage listeners again whenever you're listening, because it's interesting. We're recording this in 2011. It's March now, 2011. be weird if you're listening to it in the 50 years' time. That's, that's mind-boggling, that, isn't it?
We won't be here, Chris.
It's well, I will. I'll be in virtual.
I'll be here.
I'll be in a virtual world. My avatar will still be there. Yeah, I've downloaded my brain to my avatar in Second Life. I've completely forgotten where I was going on this now.
I'm thinking about your avatar. Yeah. Okay.
But I'm hoping that listeners will leave comments in the blog after each episode, and maybe we could finish this up. And I'm going to ask. It's almost full circle. Like I asked for the elevator pitch at the beginning. Okay, now, I know how academics like to do PowerPoints, and PowerPoints for academics are always full of 200 bullet points. What would be your bullet points? What would be your bullet points to answer that why relationships fail? You picture in your mind your PowerPoint slides up there, and you've got distinct bullet points listing them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Don't go into any relationship believing it's got an absolute unchallengeable right to last any longer than you both want it to. Sacred vows won't hold it together in the modern era, only your joint desire to be together. If you go in with that attitude, you've got 100% better chance of your relationship lasting and longer than 10 years. And this is why my practical suggestion is give your relationship a 10-year limit. But it's a break point and you both know it. Except at the end of 10 years, you're both going to renew your commitment to each other in a very strong way, or you're going to quit. Believe me, the only people who will be really unhappy about that will be the divorce lawyers.
If you've got a divorce lawyer paying you for this, that's because the second time you mentioned divorce lawyers.
Absolutely not. If you know you actually can quit with no regret, no recrimination, no guilt at the end of 10 years, it might well make you work harder at keeping the relationship going beyond that period.
Yes.
The point is not taking it for granted.
Yes. My goal. Next time, the next episode we have, I'm going to try and get you to blame the bank managers rather than the divorce lawyers, or whatever it is. I think is that what your bullet point? Anything to finish up on? Would you'd like to mention?
As I say, you're not expecting it to last a lifetime. The expectation of longevity is the burden.
Okay, but we don't want to look at the solution yet, because this chapter was why they fail, not how you stop them from failing, or how you make a better chance of it. And I think that might be a good place to stop.
Yeah, sure.
Do you think so? Thanks for that. I hope you all enjoyed that. And we're going to try and release we are going to release these every weekend, one a weekend, until we get through the 14 or so episodes. We might have a slight break. And we're thinking that maybe halfway through we'll talk a bit more about some of the other books that Stephen's done. And then the very last episode, I'm hoping we've got a few questions. I'll contact my mum to write in if nobody else does. A few comments in the blog so that we can get us a little bit of a dialogue going on that. So I hope you found that useful. And we'll see you in the next episode, which is entitled, the next chapter, Your Soulmates Are Waiting. So I hope you enjoyed that. Have fun.